What if Anakin recorded Palpatine's confession and played it to the Council? How would the Council react? Would they trust Anakin? Could Palpatine still win? Watch this What If to find out. Let's start the story when Palpatine revealed himself to Anakin. In the original timeline, Anakin was tempted by Palpatine's offer, but decided he needed to discuss it with the Council first. However, in this timeline, Anakin isn't tempted to join Palpatine at all. He realizes Palpatine is dangerous and the Jedi must capture him. But if he really is Sidious, he will be extremely powerful, and Anakin isn't 100% sure he can defeat him in combat. However, there is one way he could defeat him, by exposing his identity. He has to manipulate the Master Manipulator by recording this very conversation. While they're talking, Anakin presses a button on his wrist, activating the recording device inside his wrist armor strap. He did this while distracting Palpatine, asking him if it's true, if he really has the power to save Padme. Palpatine thought Anakin was considering joining him, which allowed Anakin to begin the recording without him knowing. He tells Anakin it's true, but he can only learn the power if he joins the dark side. But now is where Anakin knows he needs Palpatine to incriminate himself. He asks him about the war, stating that he and Dooku must have been working together this entire time. Palpatine smirks and tells Anakin that he and Dooku have been allied for decades, with the goal of creating a better galaxy and empire under Sith rule without the Jedi, where there will be true order in the galaxy. And Palpatine wants for Anakin to be by his side. Anakin deignites his lightsaber and tells Palpatine he'll have to think about it, as he did in the original timeline. But the Chancellor leaves Anakin with the final words: the only way to save Padme is to join him. Anakin leaves, his resolve still strong, and goes straight to the Jedi Council chambers. Palpatine was arrogant. He believed he had done enough to convince Anakin, and that in only a matter of hours, he would come back to his office to join him. But Anakin went to the council chambers and called a meeting. The Jedi on the planet, Saisi Tin, Agen Kolar, Shark T, Mace Windu, and Kit Fisto entered the room, whilst those off-world, Yoda, Plo Koon, Obi-Wan, Ki-Adi-Mundi, and their holograms popped up. They asked Anakin what he was doing here, but instead of explaining, he played the message that he recorded from Palpatine. The entire council listened in silence and horror as they heard Palpatine admit that he is Darth Sidious and wanted Anakin to join him, that he's been working alongside Dooku to create the clone army with the ultimate goal of complete galactic control, with the Sith Empire resurgence. Yoda asked Anakin when this happened, who told Yoda just now. The Grandmaster looked at Windu and told everyone their greatest fears have been realized. Chancellor Palpatine is Darth Sidious. He tells them all they have to act quickly. He commands every council member to return to the planet immediately, whilst those on Coruscant go straight to arrest the Chancellor. Obi-Wan speaks up, telling them the council will have to take over the Senate, and Ki-Adi-Mundi states they have no other choice. Yoda concludes by looking at Anakin and telling him he is the chosen one. The time to fulfill his duty is now, and may the Force be with them all. They waste no time and go straight to Palpatine's office. Mace Windu, Agen Kolar, Saisi Tin, Kit Fisto, Shark T, and Anakin Skywalker burst through the office doors and walk in with a commanding presence. Palpatine sensed them coming, but there was no time to escape. He was forced to confront the Jedi. Windu bursts in, declaring that Palpatine is under arrest, but the Chancellor calls for treason, looking at Anakin, telling him the Jedi have come to take over the Republic, to take power for themselves. But Anakin tells the Chancellor that he no longer believes his lies, that he's a Sith and will pay for his crimes against the galaxy. Palpatine was disappointed in Anakin, but this changes to a smirk as he tells the young Jedi that with his defiance, Padme's death is certain. Either she dies in childbirth or he kills her himself, after he dispatches all of them here. Windu told Palpatine to stand down, that he cannot survive the 6 of them. However, Palpatine genuinely thought he could, and acted in a flash. He sent Sith lightning right at the Jedi, which caught Shark T and Anakin, whilst the other 4 blocked, but Palpatine cut off the lightning, and in a split second lunged forward with his lightsabers ignited, thrusting one through Agen Kolar and the second through Saisi Tin. Windu and Fisto reacted at the last millisecond to block the following attacks, and defended as Palpatine continued to advance. The Sith spun with unseen speed, and sent a thrust at Fisto's torso, but Anakin joined the fight, blocked, and kicked Palpatine back. Shocked, he was on her feet, and the four had Palpatine surrounded. Palpatine's initial burst of strength was over, and he no longer had the art of surprise in his favor. He flung two blades with immense speed, throwing piercing attacks at critical organs, casting Sith lightning with all his might, but it was no use. It was Anakin who made the first breakthrough, cutting one of Palpatine's blades in half, which meant the Sith could no longer defend from both sides. He attempted to jump away, to use the wall to his back. However, Windu caught him mid-air and sent him crashing down with the Force, which caused him to drop his second blade. He tried to grab it through the Force, but Anakin stood on it and pointed his saber at Palpatine, declaring that he was under arrest. He tries to struggle with the Jedi, but they hold him down with the Force and put Palpatine in handcuffs and take him away to the Jedi's prison. The rest of the council arrive on Coruscant and go to the Senate chamber immediately to call an emergency session. They take the center stage and declare to the entire Senate that they've uncovered the identity of the being behind the Clone War, Darth Sidious, known by his real name, Chancellor Sheev Palpatine. Murmurs of shock echoed throughout the chamber, many calling for proof, and the Jedi answered by showing the video that Anakin had secretly acquired, showing Palpatine incriminating himself, revealing that he was working with Dooku to create the war, and together had the plan to take control of the galaxy, to recreate the Sith Empire. The Senate was in silence. No one could believe it, but Bail Organa took the stage, a key member of the Republic Security Council, and declared that what Chancellor Palpatine has done is treason, and the Jedi have saved the Republic from his tyranny. Cheers erupt as the Jedi are praised for their role in uncovering the truth about the Clone War and Palpatine. And with this, the war is essentially over. Over the following days, the Separatist Council surrendered, and the Senate and Jedi Council dealt with the political outfall, assisting in the transition of power to the new Supreme Chancellor, Bail Organa. The Jedi Council meet to discuss events that have transpired, as Yoda stood, declaring that Anakin has fulfilled his role as the Chosen One, and declares that he has earned the rank of Jedi Master. Anakin is knighted, and is now a Master of the Order. But Windu stands and talks next, and questions Anakin, telling him that Palpatine said something interesting during their fight, that Padme would certainly die, and Mace asks him directly what he must have meant by this. Anakin looked at Obi-Wan, and knew he didn't have a choice. The secret was out, and he told the entire council the truth, that he and Padme were married, and she was pregnant with his child. Murmurs scattered as the truth was revealed, but Anakin followed up, stating that he's had nightmares of her dying in childbirth, and Palpatine promised him the power to save her, which is why the Sith wrongfully believed he would join him. Yoda puts his hand on his chin and thinks what to do. He tells Anakin that this is troubling news, broken the Jedi code he has. However, come to a decision now on what to do. The council will not. Think about this, they must. However, Anakin and Padme will have the Jedi's full support in her childbirth if their power is needed. Anakin bows and thanks the Master for his support. This meant a lot to Anakin, and reaffirmed that he made the right choice in not joining Palpatine. However, the next day, Padme's water breaks and she enters labor. Anakin contacts Obi-Wan and Ahsoka, who recently returned to Coruscant, to join him, in case their help was needed. However, it wasn't, and Padme successfully gave birth to baby Luke and Leia. Anakin spent a few days with his children, until he was summoned back to the council chambers to hear the verdict. The council had discussed and debated this thoroughly, and Yoda stood to tell Anakin the final decision, that he declares that Anakin is permitted to remain in the Jedi Order, as exceptions for families have been made in the past, including Revan and the council's very own Ki-Adi-Mundi, and Anakin, being the Chosen One, is one of these exceptions. Anakin bows and takes his seat, a master and leading member of the Jedi Order. Over the following years, the Republic entered a new golden age. It took a couple of years to rebuild the damages done by the war, but the Jedi were at the forefront of this journey. With the Sith gone, all corruption had been stomped out of the Senate now that Palpatine and the Sith's influence was no longer present. Bail Organa and his bureaucracy were able to make real change in the Republic, with the largest change being taxation of the free trade zones. The entirety of this tax was used to fund war damages, and after this was complete, it was directly used to build infrastructure, housing, and basic rights to worlds that needed it the most. Meanwhile, Luke and Leia joined the Jedi Order as younglings. Their raw force power was evident early on, and they were instantly the top of their classes. They showed a similar trajectory to Anakin, and everyone knew these two were the future of the Jedi Order. Now that Anakin is on the Council, and his family is in the Order, he spends most of his time on Coruscant, either with his family, giving his opinion during Council meetings, studying the Jedi archives, and training younglings in the Temple. He does lead some missions, especially alongside his Padawan Ahsoka, now Jedi Knight, after she rejoined the Order following Maul's capture. Meanwhile, Padme worked in Organa's direct bureaucracy and had a high-ranking leadership role in the Republic. 20 more years pass as the Republic enters a new High Republic era. During this time, Yoda stepped down as Grand Master, and Obi-Wan took his place with Anakin as his second in command. Luke and Leia finished their training and are now Knights of the Order. Luke was Padawan to Plo Koon, which included disciplined, compassionate, and powerful training, and he was always guided by a master who believed in his potential more than he did. Meanwhile, Leia was trained by Shakti, and her power grew under the steady wisdom of a serene guardian. Her training was shaped by patience, deep spirituality, and the quiet strength of a master who teaches you to outthink conflict before you ever need to fight in it, which fed into Leia's strength as a diplomat. Anakin and Padme had 2 more children during this time, a daughter Shmi, 20, who was Padawan to Ahsoka, and a son Qui-Gon, who was Padawan to Obi-Wan Kenobi, both now also Jedi Knights. Meanwhile, Anakin's power had grown exponentially. His potential had no limit, and he was widely known as the strongest Jedi ever, and most powerful being in the galaxy. But what changed the most was his mentality. Previously, this would have fed his arrogance, but now he had no ego. Maybe it was his family that changed this side of him, all growing out of his youth that caused him to mature. But he was a serene Jedi Master and fought hard to bring real peace to the galaxy. Padme was currently Vice Chancellor in the Senate to Mon Mothma, who's in her last year of her final term, with Padme looking like the most promising candidate and very soon, likely the next Chancellor. The galaxy is looking prosperous, and the Skywalker family was leading the Republic into its golden age, the most famous family there has ever been. But little did they know, there was unrest brewing in the unknown regions. The Chiss Empire had just defeated the Grisk in a devastating war that lasted decades. In the original timeline, this war dragged on for years and years. However, in this timeline, it ended in a staggering defeat, the Grisk lead commander's ship directly blown up by Ascendancy forces. And this is because the Chiss had help. In their early years of the war, they were approached by an outsider who proclaimed he could offer his help and support to the Chiss. The Chiss were a proud people and didn't like outsiders, but allowed this man to prove himself, and he did. He proved his worth early on, helped in battle coordination, fighting on the front lines, and pledged himself and his power to the Chiss Empire. He was a key reason they had just won the war, and his unique power and perspective on battle proved highly valuable. And his name was none other than Hago Damask, or his other name, Darth Plagueis. In the year 32 BBY, Plagueis was cut down by his apprentice, Darth Sidious. He was left for dead. Palpatine thought he had killed him, but little did Palpatine know, Plagueis had mastered control over the midichlorians. After Palpatine dumped Plagueis' body, was when he activated his true power. He connected to the last few midichlorians inside of him to keep himself alive. It took years until he could build up enough strength to escape his grave, but he did. Feeding on the nutrients in the soil, he was able to maintain his physical body. At the first chance, he escaped to the unknown regions, undetected by anyone. He spent even more years regaining his lost strength and power, whilst he conjured up his plan for revenge against the Jedi and Palpatine, to infiltrate and use the Chiss forces for himself. He worked his way up the ranks of the Chiss until he became the first commander of the Chiss fleet and worked alongside the second in command, Admiral Thrawn. He gained this position because the knowledge and skills he provided turned the tide of the war and allowed the Chiss to win. However, because of the position he was in, Plagueis worked closely with and reported to the 9 aristocrat leaders of the Chiss, and they took on his recommendations often. Because Plagueis worked closely with them for years, He was able to use the dark side of the Force to play tricks on their minds. It took years to do, but slowly and subtly, he planted Force mind tricks on 4 of the members, one of which being the most respected leader, Saganu. He took this slow, until he was able to manipulate their thoughts with ease, and plant subtle thoughts or manipulations into their minds. Because of this essentially made Plagueis the proxy leader of the Chiss. After the war with the Grysk was over, the Chiss celebrated. However, shortly after, Plagueis warned them that the true war was coming. The war with the Republic. He detailed to the aristocrat leaders how the Republic defeated the Separatists 20 years ago, and following this, they've continued their expansion into the Outer Rim and eventually will reach the unknown regions. Aralani, one of the aristocrats, speaks up, arguing that they will simply not join the Republic, but Plagueis details how it's not that simple. After they refuse, the Republic will block trade routes and supply lines to starve out their system until they're forced to join. Plagueis essentially had control of the aristocrat and used his mind control of the 4 members to convince them that this was their best choice of action, to engage the Republic in war. He spent weeks doing this, and in the aristocrat meetings, the 4 under his control argued for war, and eventually the other 5 agreed with persuasion, and they voted in favor of war with the Republic. The orders came out through the Chiss ascendancy, and they began building up their forces. However, shortly after, Thrawn, second in command of the fleet, asked Plagueis why they're going to war. Saying that it doesn't seem beneficial, Plagueis told Thrawn that this was the only way to prevent the Republic from invading in the future. But Thrawn thought about this. It didn't make sense. The Chiss always held back and were not aggressive and never engaged an enemy unless they entered their territory. This wasn't right. Something more was going on, and he would get to the bottom of it. The initial attacks caught the Republic off guard. They weren't ready, but quickly got into action. They called back many of the clone police around the galaxy to use them for the Republic army, and caught up all the Venator-class Star Destroyers not used since the Clone War. Correspondence came later to the Senate from the Chiss aristocrat leaders, stating that they have declared war on the Republic. The Grand Army of the Republic was assembled, and they engaged the Chiss in battle. The Jedi once again became the generals of the clone army to lead them into battle. One of Anakin's sub-roles on the council is that he was the master of war, and would now be the leader of the clone army. He was involved heavily in the war, as were his children, each given command of a fleet of their own, with Luke taking the 501st. All-out war broke out around the galaxy. The Chiss started seizing the Outer Rim territories and setting up their base of operations to launch campaigns into the core worlds. Their Star Destroyers were devastating, faster than Republic ships, with a heavy emphasis on long-range engagements. The Republic had to adjust to their unique weaponry, the magnetoplasma bolts, which were more effective than turbo lasers, and plasma spheres, which created explosive energy bubbles that could swallow small ships whole. Thrawn was a devastating admiral, gaining many early victories and advancing the Chiss hold into the mid-rim. Anakin led on the front lines and had many victories, but the council couldn't help but feel something was off. The Chiss attacking out of nowhere and refusing any diplomatic peace talks was unexpected. Plagueis knew to win the war, he would need to defeat Anakin and his family. They were an anomaly of the Force, beings of his own creation, and thus his to defeat. He decides to target the youngest and weakest son, Qui-Gon. Qui-Gon led the 367th, currently stationed around Barabesh. Plagueis attacked with the entire might of his fleet, which caught the 367th off guard. They weren't prepared for an assault of this scale, and did their best to defend, but Plagueis hit them hard, taking out half of their Venator Star Destroyers in under 5 minutes. Thrawn led the assault, whilst Plagueis advised, and they sent out a long-range tractor beam, which inhibited Qui-Gon's command ship from escaping. It was only a matter of time before Plagueis boarded his ship with the Chiss forces. Qui-Gon prepared for the boarding, but he was left in shock when he saw Plagueis and his red blade. He and the Jedi thought the Sith were extinct, but they were mistaken. He attempted to send a message to the Republic, but Plagueis was on him before he could act. Plagueis connected to the midichlorians inside of Qui-Gon, attempting to gain control of them for himself, but he disarmed Qui-Gon and subdued him with ease. Plagueis and Thrawn interrogated Qui-Gon, who asked both about the Republic and Anakin the Chosen One, but Qui-Gon remained firm, not giving anything away, and he was immune to Plagueis' mind probes. And Qui-Gon spits at them, telling Plagueis that he may have defeated him, but he's no match for his father, the Chosen One Anakin Skywalker, who's defeated the Sith once and will do so again. But Plagueis laughs and tells Qui-Gon that he knows all about his father and how powerful he is, because he's the one who created him. Qui-Gon's face goes pale, as Plagueis tells him, "Yes boy, I'm the one who created the Chosen One, and his power will be mine." However, Thrawn at that moment was confused by that comment. Nothing that Plagueis said was about the Chiss or their victory. It was all about himself, Plagueis, how he would have revenge, and the galaxy would be under his control. The Sith messed up, and Thrawn now realizes what's happened. He was a master strategist, and has uncovered the plot of Plagueis. The Sith didn't truly care about the Chiss. He's simply using them for his own personal desires, and he's witnessed this with his own eyes. Plagueis attempting to use a mind trick on Qui-Gon. What's to stop him from doing so? To the Chiss, and his eyes go wide in a moment of realization. Plagueis already has. He must have done so with the Chiss aristocrat, which is why they pursued the war so strongly. A day later, Thrawn reaches out to the Republic, to the only one whom he's ever had contact with, Anakin Skywalker. They met during the Clone War, and he still had Anakin's ship code. They messaged back and forth, and decided to meet on the planet Gordman. Anakin came, a member of the Jedi Council, alongside Padme, Vice Chancellor of the Republic. Thrawn told Anakin the truth, that Plagueis is a Sith Lord, who was in control of the Chiss, and had their leaders under mind control to begin the war with the Republic, and they now have his son, Qui-Gon, in custody. Anakin froze when he heard the name, Plagueis. The same Plagueis that had learned the power over life and death, the Sith that Palpatine attempted to use to manipulate him to his side. He was alive? The Sith were not extinct. Anakin realized at that moment he had not completed his role as the Chosen One. The Sith were still alive, and he had more work to do. Padme asked Thrawn where Plagueis was keeping their son, but he did not know, and will work to find out the truth. But in the meantime, we'll feed the Republic information that can help the Jedi capture Plagueis, but only if they agree to a peaceful treaty after the war is over. Padme is Vice Chancellor, and concurs on behalf of the Republic. Plagueis is sitting on his command ship in his private quarters, deep in meditation. The Force had shown him many visions over the years, and he tried to take control of them, to demand the Force to show him the future, but to little success. His clearest vision was when he first laid eyes on Anakin when he was just 9 years old, arriving on Coruscant for the first time. The vision showed Anakin by his side, as they led the Sith Empire across the galaxy together. For a while, he let this vision lead him, believing that one day it would become true. However, with time, he started to realize this vision was a fallacy. There's no way Anakin Skywalker, Jedi Master with Jedi children, and future Grand Master of the Order would one day join him. No, the vision had a different meaning, and Plagueis came to the conclusion that the Force was telling Plagueis that Anakin standing by his side was a metaphor for the fact that Plagueis can steal Anakin's power for himself, and this is possible through his manipulation of the midichlorians that he spent decades perfecting. However, to do this, he needs the Chosen One vulnerable, and begins formulating his plans to do so. Qui-Gon was taken to a prison on Jakku by Plagueis, who stationed his forces there. Thrawn got wind of this and sent information to the Republic, and the Jedi Council discussed what to do, and Anakin declared he would lead his family personally to defeat Plagueis and end the war. Anakin and the Jedi mobilize their forces and take an entire fleet to Jakku. They come out of hyperspace and engage the Chiss forces, but the Republic had a stronger fleet and broke the blockade to the planet, as their small fighters make their way down to the surface. They land a kilometer away from the prison and take out the ground troops. Anakin, Luke, Leia and Shmi fighting with all their power to save Qui-Gon. They enter the prison and the clones with them rush inside, but they can't find Qui-Gon anywhere, and they start hearing the screams of the clones dying, but more importantly, the dark side rising. They break into the main room to find it empty, but through the dark corridor at the end, Darth Plagueis walks in, with Thrawn and Chiss warriors flooding in all around them. Plagueis smiles as they all sense the change in the space outside the planet. A fresh fleet of Chiss Star Destroyers have exited hyperspace and have engaged the Republic forces surrounding the planet. Plagueis taunts Anakin, telling him he knew he was coming. He sensed Thrawn's betrayal the moment that it happened and tracked his ship to where he met with him and Padme. He fed Thrawn the false information that Qui-Gon was here because he wanted him to give it to Anakin to lure him out. Plagueis turns to his forces and tells him to put Thrawn, the traitor, in handcuffs. On either side of Plagueis stood his two dark sisters, 16-year-old Force-sensitive Chiss warriors, trained in the dark side of the Force by himself. The room erupts into battle, the Chiss warriors taking on the clones, the Dark Sisters taking on Anakin's children, whilst Plagueis and Skywalker stood opposite each other. Plagueis took off his hood and revealed something dangling from his chest, which was the gauntlet of Krish the Younger. Anakin recognized it instantly from the Jedi archives, a Sith amulet thought to be lost to time, with the power to provide the wearer with a massive Force strength boost. Plagueis started chanting, and Anakin dropped to the floor instantly, and gripped his head as Plagueis stood, hand outstretched, siphoning not only the power from Anakin, but the midichlorians themselves. He had orchestrated this entire moment to steal Anakin's power for himself. Skywalker squirmed in pain and felt his life force leaving him. He tried to fight it to protect his spirit, but the power the gauntlet of Krish provided was too strong, and there was nothing he could do. Meanwhile, around the battle, Luke realized what was happening. Sensing his father's demise, he threw his lightsaber at Plagueis, but it was blocked by the invisible force field created around him. He knew he needed to end the fight, and end it fast. He grabbed his lightsaber back and turned to the Dark Sisters. He could tell they weren't trying to kill the Skywalker children, merely stall them for time. But Luke knew how to counter this. He walked forward past them, which caused them to turn to face him. But from behind, Luke and Shmi advanced. Because of this, the Dark Sisters were forced to fight on two fronts, and with a slick maneuver of his blade, Luke cut through the red saber of one, and Leia seized the other through the Force. They were sent flying back unconscious, as they all turned to face Anakin and Plagueis. Luke looked at his siblings and told them they needed to save their father, and to flow their Force energy into him, to connect to the cosmic force that binds their family, and only then can they achieve the power to stop Plagueis. They do this, and Anakin realizes what's happening immediately. His children have come to save him. He begins fighting back, focusing on the power his children are giving him, and not only putting up a defense, but sending it straight back towards Plagueis. The Sith Lord realizes what's happening. The Dark Sisters have failed him, but he will still prevail. He has no other choice. He's planned this for decades. He starts talking to Anakin, telling him it could have been different. He tells Skywalker he knows he can feel it, the unique connection between himself and Anakin, and tells the Chosen One this is because he created him. He was a byproduct of his experiments with the midichlorians, and thus his power was his to claim. Anakin couldn't believe it. His entire life, he's wondered the mystery of why he's so powerful, why he is the Chosen One, and the real answer has just been revealed. He's a byproduct of Plagueis' manipulation of the Force, but Anakin realizes this can't be right. If this was true, he would be destined for the dark side, and Anakin tells Plagueis he is wrong. He wasn't a byproduct of his experiments of his dark manipulation, but rather he was created by the Force itself to fight back against Plagueis in this very moment. He was the Chosen One, and the time to prove it was now. Anakin stood and connected to the richness of the cosmic force deeper than he ever has before. He looked behind at his children, and they nod in unison. They thrust the Force back towards Plagueis with all their strength, as the Force hits him with the might of a Star Destroyer. In an instant, the gauntlet of Krish on his neck shattered into a million pieces, and he sent flying back against the rear wall with the Force. His vision went black momentarily, but he stands, ready to fight back against the Skywalker children, until he tried to connect with the Force, and realizes it isn't answering him. He goes to summon Sith Lightning, but it fails, and he turns to Anakin, demanding he tells him what he's done. And Skywalker said he did his role as the Chosen One, and has defeated the Sith by taking away Plagueis' connection to his own midichlorians, so he can no longer use the Force. Plagueis went silent with that revelation. He didn't know what to say, think, or do, and Anakin pulls him close with the Force and put him in handcuffs. They had won. Anakin releases Thrawn, and they return to their fleet immediately. However, they find the Republic and Chiss no longer fighting. This is because when Anakin severed Plagueis' connection to the Force, the mind trick he had on the Chiss aristocrat had broken, and they called for an immediate end to the fighting. Anakin returned to Coruscant with his family, and over the following days, the Chiss and Republic discussed terms. After Plagueis' control over the Chiss leaders was revealed, they were excused for initiating the Galactic War and entered a peace treaty, and as a sign of good faith, gave back Qui-Gon and relinquished control of all the territory they had captured. The 9 aristocrats meet with Chancellor Mothma and Vice Chancellor Padme, as well as the Jedi Council. They offer for Chiss to join the Republic, but Saganu politely states that they decline, believing they're best served as an independent people. However, he states they should come up with a partnership treaty to agree to help either entity if attacked by external forces. However, Mon Mothma states that now the Sith are gone, and most of the galaxy is under Republic control. There is little risk of an external threat, but Saganu asks her and the Jedi Council if they've heard of the Yuzong Vong. Meanwhile, Anakin and his family meet to celebrate the victory of the war. Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, and Thrawn join them. As the celebrations faded into the quiet conversation and laughter, Anakin stepped away from the table and looked out across the Coruscant skyline. Plagueis' words echoed in his mind. "I created you." It had been the answer to a question that had lingered in him since childhood. The unspoken fear that he could never admit aloud. Why am I the way I am? Why me? For years he had wrestled with the mystery of his birth, of the prophecy, of the raw and terrifying power inside of him, and for a moment, Plagueis had tried to turn that mystery into a chain. But Anakin could feel the truth now, as clearly as he felt the Force flowing through him. His origin did not define him, his choices did. If Plagueis had sparked life, then the Force had shaped it, and his family had given it purpose. He looked back at Padme, at Luke and Leia, at Shmi and Qui-Gon, at the future masters and leaders of the next age of Jedi. Chosen one. He finally understood the truth. His entire family is to be a light against the darkness, and together they had saved the galaxy once again, and they would protect it for every generation to come. Thanks for watching, everyone. Just a reminder to check out our Christmas sale over at Fantasy Sabers for insane discounts on the best sabers on the market. Let me know what you thought of the video in the comments, and I'll see you all next time.